Welcome to the Conference Championship edition of the Sharp Football Show. We're going to be breaking down both of these great games. We've got a triple header rematch in the NFC. I'm really interested to see what the TV ratings do for this game between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles, because unless you like to watch teams play 3 times in a season, or you're a fan of the NFC East, or you're just a diehard NFL fan, I'm pretty sure there aren't going to be as many people fascinated with this battle of these teams in close proximity here on the East Coast. So the ratings already struggling. I'm really curious to see what happens in that game. And then, of course, the juggernaut that we've all been waiting for between the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to break these games down in tremendous amount of detail. We're going to bring on Pamela Maldonado to talk each game. We're going to bring on our ref analyst, Joe Gibbs, to talk each game. It's going to be a ton of fun. Looking forward to these games immensely. And obviously, after that, we've got the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl prep starts Sunday night, right? Like Sunday night, as soon as the final whistle blows for the Chiefs versus the Bills. And hopefully that happens the very end of the game in terms of this game being competitive all 60 minutes, maybe even overtime. We'll see. The new overtime rules obviously take that into consideration as you're handicapping these games. If you go down and score a touchdown in these playoffs, you do not just walk off and win the game. The other team gets the ball and they get to go down and try to score a touchdown themselves. So that's going to be a lot of fun watching that unfold. But who knows how long that Bills-Chiefs game is going to be competitive. Like I said, hopefully till the very end. And then they roll out the Super Bowl line. And very soon thereafter, we start getting tons of Super Bowl props. Super Bowl props just ad nauseum. And I got a great idea that we launched up at the website. I'm going to be sharing this with you in a little bit, maybe midway through the show, about a contest that you guys all can enter to try to win some big prizes here as it relates to Super Bowl props. So I'm really looking forward to that. Actually, I think we're going to roll out 2 different contests, but we're going to have a lot of announcements for these types of things on Monday. So stay tuned on Monday, just in a few days from now. We're going to announce a lot of different contests as it relates to the Super Bowl. Obviously, a big time of year. This is an NFL betting show. It's an NFL betting YouTube channel. And so we'll be here for you, giving you guys some NFL draft recommendations, some shows after the season ends. We're going to talk about coaching changes in greater detail. We're going to talk about free agency, all these different types of things. We'll be here all year, 12 months out of the year. But this obviously is the climax of everything here, is the Super Bowl, and lots of great content coming out for the Super Bowl over the next couple of weeks. Hop into the chat if you aren't there. If you want to chat with us, head on over to YouTube, search for Sharp Football Analysis, bring up our channel, make sure that you subscribe, and make sure that you like this episode. We are going to be going through a ton of different things here with you today and getting some of your comments out there. Positron says, let's get 10 likes before this even starts. I don't know if you were successful there, Positron, but if you aren't to 10, make sure you guys get to 10. Let's go get past the 10. Sad day, says Tyler, when you can no longer bet on Jahmyr Gibbs' longest overs. Indeed, each year there's a running back out there, 1 or 2, just seems to be printing on those longest run overs. And certainly identifying them as early as you can in the season and getting them when the rushing lines are 15.5, 16.5. I remember 2 years ago, we were obviously on the Gibbs. We still had a little bit of the Nick Chubb. And then we also were getting a little bit of involvement. You guys remember Keaton Mitchell for the Baltimore Ravens started to come on late in the season. We were betting him. That was also the year where we were able to bet a little bit of Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals. These guys, when they don't have a lot of rushing attempts, where they're kind of splitting work, but they're the explosive back, the change of pace back, so to speak, and they get introduced and rolled out sometimes later on in the season. They start to get a few more carries, start to put up some lines, and they're not going to line these guys at 17.5, 18.5, 19.5 over their longest rushing attempt. So you get some great numbers early on there for several weeks. So that was a ton of fun watching that. Jimmy says, for strictly football content, there is no better show. I'm not even kidding. Appreciate that, Jimmy. We're going to try to give you another great show today. And Larry says, no Splash Sports. So we did a Splash Sports contest for the NFL pick'em for the playoffs. And I'm going to regroup with my team after the season ends to find out how that contest goes, because the prior year, for all of our subscribers, we did a contest through Yahoo Sports. And we did a playoff pick'em through Yahoo Sports, which is accessible through all 50 states, I assume. And for Larry, he's saying that he could not get Splash Sports in Pennsylvania. So if we did not get the same amount, and anybody who is a season-long subscriber, a postseason subscriber with us, could for free submit their picks, and we give out cash prizes. I think it was in excess of $4,000 to the winner of the contest for the pick'em in the postseason. If we didn't get enough support there through Splash Sports, we'll pivot and we'll go back to Yahoo next year. The problem with Yahoo is we only had 100 spots in each of the leagues that you start up. And we are running through league after league after league because we had so many people that were signing up for this thing that we had to open and maintain multiple different leagues. But hey, if that's what it takes to get a lot of you guys in there so that you guys can participate and win the prizes, then we'll go back to Yahoo or some other solution that does not restrict certain states from winning, because I don't like that at all, for sure. So that's annoying to me. Okay, first up though, before we dive into the game by game previews, I do want to talk briefly about some of these new coaching hires and just opine on a couple of these positions. So let's go ahead and start with that topic. First, let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know, the Jacksonville Jaguars go after Liam Cohen. They land Liam Cohen. The timeline of that is quite interesting. Obviously, as you guys know, you have a general manager in there that nobody wants to work with this guy. And for whatever reason, you have the ownership, Shad Khan of the Jacksonville Jaguars, saying that he would rather commit suicide. Let me try to pull up the exact quote here of what Shad Khan said. I tweeted it out yesterday, which is just crazy to me. About Trent Baalke, he said, quote, when Khan was asked why he didn't do a complete overhaul of the coaching staff and front office, which would include firing Baalke, he replied, that would be, quote, suicidal, which I thought was just the most idiotic thing to say about somebody like a Trent Baalke. You can say whatever you want about a guy who might be your friend, who's worked with you for a long time. Those are the type of situations where, unless you've been winning, you really have to think about course correcting yourself there, about working with a close friend if you're not having a lot of success. This probably goes for all walks of life out there, but at times it's good to be working with somebody who's either new or who's going to challenge you. Maybe you don't get along as great with this person. Maybe their work habits are a little bit different than yours, but it's not a super comfortable situation. But if they're advancing the company and if they're making things better for you, then you have to maybe pivot in that direction. And it felt like Shad Khan was so in bed with, so to speak, and comfortable with working with Trent Baalke that he really couldn't imagine pivoting. But it was costing him opportunities to bring in coaches that truly mattered. So you had a guy in Trent Baalke who wasn't going to be fired. They fired the head coach. So then they go out there and try to bring in a bunch of new coach interviews to do interviews. One of them was Liam Cohen. Liam Cohen ultimately decides, hey, I don't necessarily want to work with Trent Baalke for this price. I'm going to go back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it sounded like, I don't know if this has been made public specifically, it sounded like he agreed in terms verbally with what a contract would look like, but he didn't sign on the dotted line yet. And then he went back home and made a quick call back to the Jaguars to say, any changes here? Or he saw the Jaguars fire Trent Baalke and to lure him back in there. And so he slipped out in the middle of the night, made up an excuse, went back to Jacksonville, had another sit down with the Khans, and agreed to a lot bigger price tag and obviously a much higher position there of head coach, no longer having to work with Trent Baalke. I know a lot of people in Tampa say that this is unethical, immoral, not the right thing to do. I think that's probably the way that I lean. However, this is more like a coin flip to me because you have a once in a lifetime opportunity maybe to be a head coach. What if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense stinks next year and you're not viewed in the same light as you are? And you're making life-changing money with the Jacksonville Jaguars as their head coach. And let's face it, these organizations fire head coaches all the time. You might be fired from your job at any point in time. So, like, they're so quick to fire you not having signed the paperwork and going to work somewhere else. Like, this has happened before. So I know it's not very typical. I know it's happened only a few times that something like this would have occurred, but I can in some ways see Liam Cohen's perspective on, as long as I didn't sign on the bottom line, on the dotted line, and I'm getting a better job with a lot more money, and now I don't have to work with this guy, I'm going to go take advantage of it. So it's just tough. I can understand why Tampa Bay fans probably aren't that happy about him doing that for sure. But you're going to be losing this guy anyway, and that sort of segues me into the discussion of having a defensive-minded head coach. This is what happens when you have a defensive-minded head coach. This is what happens when you've got a Todd Bowles. Like, you're going to have a decent offensive coordinator who might have some success because your roster is pretty good and your division stinks, right? Let's face it, the NFC South, not the best division out there, right? If you look at the quarterback situations and that sort of thing, both the South divisions have been not that great for a few years now. So you're in a division that's not that great. Doesn't take that much to like potentially advance. You have a good season with a decent roster. Your OC is going to get poached because you have a defensive-oriented head coach, even if the defense wasn't necessarily the reason that you won those games. So guess what, Bucs fans? The same thing could happen to you again. If you go out there and hire a really good offensive coordinator, in 2 years, the same exact thing could happen again. Maybe even a year if you bring in like a showstopper and have another ridiculously good season. So that's just life when you have a defensive-oriented head coach. So you can get mad if you're a Bucs fan if you want to about him doing that, but he was only there for 1 year, and it's probably going to happen again pretty darn quickly as well. The Raiders obviously go out there and they get Pete Carroll. That division now has all of these ancient but successful and understand how to build teams and programs, head coaches. It's going to be fun to watch these guys battle. I'll be honest. Like, yeah, they're older. Yeah, they're experienced, let's say. But in a league where we're trending to younger coaches, all these like player coaches working with these young guys, the fact of the matter is, like, Pete Carroll was always viewed though as a player's coach, even though he was pretty old. And you bring in young assistants. It'll be interesting to see what happens there in Dallas as well. Now that I don't think it's been finalized with Brian Schottenheimer, but obviously he has experience working with Pete Carroll there in Seattle. And I think it's almost assured that Brian Schottenheimer is going to go to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not positive. This just speaks to me that Jerry Jones doesn't really know what he's doing. I mean, like, even if you are a massive Brian Schottenheimer fan, to think that like, this was a likely move 3 months ago, unless you're getting fed some inside information from Jerry Jones, this is pretty surprising to me, right? Like, that you're going to go from Mike McCarthy, who has taken this team and had success with this team, but hasn't reached that ultimate pinnacle, to a guy on his staff who wasn't even calling the plays in Brian Schottenheimer. And you think he's going to do a better job with this group? I would just be surprised if this team does better with Brian Schottenheimer. More than anything, I think that this was a move by Jerry to bring somebody in that he could control everything about the process. If I had to guess, they go out there and they bring in those discussions with Mike McCarthy after the season. Jerry wanted to potentially put some people on that staff that he viewed as maybe future coaches. We're talking Jason Witten, etc. And Mike McCarthy wasn't really in tune with doing something like that. Mike McCarthy didn't want to do that. And then there was probably arguments and discussions about the money. And so then you got to a situation where, I don't know who pulled their name out. Like, did Jerry say, get gone? Or did Mike McCarthy say, I'm out of here then? But they couldn't come to agreement with the money or probably the makeup of the staff. And so Mike McCarthy left. And now you've got Jerry Jones sitting there knowing that he missed out on most of the upper echelon coaches from interview process, but having his own vision. He's always like going his own way as to who he ultimately wants to be their head coach, and maybe biding some time a little bit here with regards to, let me get a guy in here right now, may be temporary, who I can control. I can control the roster. They're not going to care about how the roster is built. They're not going to care who I stick on the coaching staff maybe, and we'll get this team the way that I want it to be, so that in a year or two, we'll be able to move to the coach that I want to have coach for a longer term. I'd just be surprised if he views Brian Schottenheimer as a long-term coach for the Dallas Cowboys. Okay. Let's get into a little preview here, what we all came here for. Let's first start talking about the Washington Commanders versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay. And actually, I'm seeing word. You guys could share this in the chat so I can see it. Let me see if I can add this to my channel here. We're going to have to take a quick second break for me to, and then post this to our feed here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. See if this works. All right, I just posted it to our feed, guys. If it tweets it out, I have no idea what's going to happen now that we've already started the show. It looks like it did there. Okay, so we're live to the rest of the world. Ian says Jerry looks for somebody who's going to fall in line. Absolutely, specifically in this case, for sure. Okay, the Commanders at the Eagles. Third time, obviously, that we're seeing this matchup. And I'm going to share a little bit of what I shared last week because I still think it's extremely appropriate. And if the Eagles advance to the Super Bowl, it's going to be even more appropriate. We saw some of these issues last week with Jalen Hurts, and I commented on the show on Tuesday about Jalen Hurts and why were they even trying to pass the ball when clearly it wasn't having as much success against the Los Angeles Rams, and they were getting a ton of success out of their ground game. But the issue is going to be Jalen Hurts getting rid of that football. Now he's got this knee injury. He may not be 100%. I mean, we know he's not going to be 100%. What percent is he going to be? We're not so sure yet. But this offensive line ranks 6th best in pass block win rate. They should be doing a good enough job at preventing pass rushers to getting to Jalen Hurts. 6th best pass block win rate. And yet, Jalen Hurts have been pressured at the 2nd highest rate of any quarterback this year, behind only Deshaun Watson in terms of the highest pressure rate. And the large reason for that is because Jalen Hurts is holding onto the football for the largest time to throw of any quarterback in the NFL. He is holding on to the football for 3.1 seconds this season on average. He also ranks 29th in rate of throws within 2.5 seconds. He has the number 1 highest rate of throws holding the ball for 4+ seconds in the NFL. His air yards per attempt, however, is only 7.8, which is 20th. So he's holding onto the ball at the highest rate, but instead of pushing the ball down the field, taking advantage of all that time, and think about it, you get the ball behind the line and you start your drop, and you might be waiting for receivers to work their way down the field, and you might be dropping even deeper. All of that takes time. And so the longer you're in the pocket, theoretically, the deeper you're going to be looking to throw the football. But that's not the case for Jalen Hurts. He's holding onto the ball and still only throwing it 20th out of 39 quarterbacks in terms of his target depth down the field. He's inviting pressure for absolutely no reason whatsoever, except for the fact that he either isn't diagnosing things quickly enough, or he is struggling with the way, like, Jalen Hurts doesn't match up with Kellen Moore's offense. I'm not quite sure which one, who I'd place more blame on. But if I'm Kellen Moore, I'm aware of the situation. And in a perfect world, my quarterback would be getting rid of the ball quicker to hit these routes so that he's not taking on pressure, because you know that when Jalen Hurts is under pressure, as with any quarterback, they are much worse when throwing the football. So if I'm Kellen Moore, I'm saying, look, I got a season's worth of data here. I understand my quarterback isn't operating as effectively with the scheme that I want him to operate with. We're going to change things and modify things entirely to help him function at his peak, given his detriments, given the issues that he has. I would be looking for more Saquon Barkley passes in this game. I would be looking for more Dallas Goedert targets in this game. Yes, I want to push the ball down the field to A.J. Brown, and yes, I want to push the ball down the field to Devonta Smith, and I want some explosive plays in the passing game. And if I get the right coverage and I get, most importantly, the right protection, we can hunt a few of those. But overall, we need to get rid of the ball quickly. We need to get the ball out of Jalen Hurts' hands faster. If you think about the mismatches that the Eagles receivers of all types, including their running back, including their tight end, not just the wide receivers, have over this Washington Commanders secondary, it's pretty serious. It's pretty significant. There's a lot of talented, fast guys on this Philadelphia Eagles receiving core that cannot do anything unless they have the ball in their hand, right? You're not going to make these plays happen down the field if your quarterback is under too much pressure, or if those guys don't get the ball in their hand a little bit earlier. So figure out a way. It should not be hard. This is, to me, I'm looking at this Philadelphia Eagles situation here, and I know the Commanders are the talk of the town. And I know that in 49 states or thereabouts, people are rooting for the Commanders to pull off this upset. But if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you have to be thanking your lucky stars for the Washington Commanders. You have to be so appreciative of what Jaden Daniels has done this year, and Dan Quinn and this Washington Commanders. Because think about the teams that the Philadelphia Eagles might struggle with. Teams with stronger defenses, stronger against the run. They've had trouble with these teams in the past. And the Commanders were the ones who knocked out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have given the Philadelphia Eagles trouble. The Commanders knocked off the Detroit Lions, which had been a difficult situation for the Philadelphia Eagles to go into to try to deal with that very balanced offense in Detroit in that situation. With Jalen Hurts, obviously, he was banged up and injured. Right? It's a lot easier if you're hosting the Los Angeles Rams from sunny California on dealing with the fires and all their travel back and forth to Arizona, now coming out to you at home in the snow, than if the Philadelphia Eagles last week were going up to Detroit to play the Detroit Lions. And you can say, oh, well, if the Commanders were able to win that game, then the Philadelphia Eagles would have won that game also. I don't think you could say that at all. Every game is unique and very different. If that game with the Lions and the Commanders was played 10 times, that result would have happened only one time, the way that it did. So I don't think you can say that at all. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are in the most perfect situation that they could possibly be in. And if they don't make it back to the Super Bowl this year, shame on them. Shame on their coaching staff for not being able to figure out what to do with this roster. Because in my opinion, this roster is probably the most balanced Philadelphia Eagles roster that they've had in this kind of serious and successful run that the Philadelphia Eagles have had. Most balanced roster on both sides of the ball, and high ceiling as well with certain positions. Some of the best players and a very balanced roster. Not only do they have that roster, they also have this great path to the playoffs, which they can just thank their lucky stars for. A team like the Commanders knocking off some of these teams that would have given the Eagles tough situations, and then allow the Eagles to host this game against, of all teams, the Washington Commanders, a team that you know inside and out. Vic Fangio going up against Cliff Kingsbury for the third time in one season. Who's the best player on the Commanders offense aside from Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin? You don't really have anybody at all that really scares you on that team. You got, maybe Austin Eckler catching the ball out of the backfield, or Brian Robinson could break maybe a run. Like he's an okay back. There's nobody really there. Now they're without Sam Cosmi. I mean, it's the most perfect situation for the Philadelphia Eagles that they could dream of. So if they don't win this game and they don't advance to the Super Bowl, in this season of all seasons, a colossal embarrassment for that team. Now, there are some things that Washington can do. I really like the way that that Dan Quinn came against the Lions and changed up his defense like that overnight and played a ton of zone instead of the man coverage that they've been trending toward, and really confused Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions passing attack and caused them a ton of problems. And we know that the Philadelphia Eagles are better throwing the ball against man coverage. And so maybe they do come into this game and play a lot more zone. They just played more zone last week. I'm looking for all the stops to be pulled here for the Washington Commanders team. You got to run Jaden Daniels. That was the thing when we were looking at Jaden Daniels before the season started. We said, me and the guys that I work with from a betting perspective, after I finish up writing the book and we're talking about some of the futures that we were looking to get down on, obviously Jaden Daniels rushing yards is one of the top 10 futures that you might want to bet. But the concern always for Jaden Daniels was he runs so much and he's so thin and he runs so upright and he doesn't necessarily look to avoid contact that there's a very good chance that Jaden Daniels gets injured this season. And if Jaden Daniels is injured this season and you don't know how long he's going to be out for, there's a very good chance that you're not winning that prop bet. So that was the only thing, literally the only thing that kept us off of him. Now, lo and behold, pretty early into the season against the Carolina Panthers, he gets injured and he gets knocked out of that game. Fortunately for the Commanders, it was not a long-term injury. He was able to play through that injury, and now he's back to full health. But the issue always for Jaden Daniels was not ever was it a matter of he's not going to be able to run in the NFL. He's not going to be able to translate that skill set to the competition like the NFL has defensively. It was always a matter of, is he going to get hurt? And so now you've got a game where you have 2 weeks off if you win, and you've got the Super Bowl in front of you, and this is the NFC Championship. You're running Jaden Daniels as much as you can and as long as you need to, as many times as possible, if that's giving you the upper hand. So we all know that the most efficient play in football is a designed pass play where a running lane opens up and the quarterback, instead of trying to work through his progressions and hang in the pocket, just takes off and goes and gets those yards, whether it's 6 yards, whether it's 10 yards, whether it's 15 yards. He goes and gets those yards because he knows he's probably not going to be tackled for a 2-yard gain because he sees an open run line. That is the single most efficient play in all of football. And hopefully the Washington Commanders will utilize Jaden Daniels and run him early and often. Ryan says the Cosmi loss can't be overstated. Guy is so good. Jalen Carter to have a sack. Cursor's in the way. Plus 120. Plus 120. I'm not sure what the line is. I have seen him to have over a quarter of a sack, which is obviously a little bit more interesting, which means that if he combines for a half a sack, if they split a sack, then you win. If you're betting that he has a sack, that means he has to have an actual sack by himself, one full sack. He cannot have any assistance on that sack. And so then you're up to it's up to the scorekeeper as to how they grade that, unless he does get a full sack. There's a good chance. We know Jaden Daniels, especially on third downs, does have a tendency to either have a big play or take a sack. Now, he's been avoiding sacks this postseason. He's been good at scrambling, getting out of bounds, and not being put in those situations. And I would expect against a defense like this that's trying to take away the big play, that the Commanders are operating with a high pass volume, a very spread offense like they typically do. Get the ball out of Jaden Daniels' hands quickly. You're only hunting those deep plays once in a while. if you can get like a max protection type situation or you're rolling him out, then you're hunting those deep plays, but you're not starting off the game doing that. Now, I'm interested to see what Cliff Kingsbury does. Sometimes these significant underdog teams with nothing much to lose come out on that first play and try to make something big happen. Remember the Denver Broncos going into Buffalo? They had that big play right out the gates. I think it was like the fifth or sixth play of the entire game on their first drive, where Bo Nix throws the ball deep down the field. I don't know if that was Marvin Mims that he hit or somebody else, but they had that massive over-the-top play at the very beginning of the game. And that's absolutely what maybe what Cliff Kingsbury looks to try to do. Change up what the Eagles might be expecting. They're expecting a slow, let's work our quarterback in here, our young quarterback, to this NFC Championship game. And all of a sudden we just strike. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how he comes out with. Better Boss says Jalen Carter over a quarter of a sack plus 103 DK. So I like that one better than a full sack. Ryan, for sure. Better Boss. I like that one a lot more. Ian says, wait, if the Eagles lose, I think, to the one and only Jaden Daniels, it's not too bad. Yeah, I mean, Washington never expected to be here in this rookie season of Jaden Daniels. So I think certainly a shock, a massive shock if they were to lose this game. Not that Washington couldn't pull off the upset. You know, they obviously won earlier. That was not against Jalen Hurts, though. And the prior game, if you go back and look at that prior game, the first meeting of the season, obviously Jaden Daniels was even younger. Not as close as that final score indicated necessarily, but should be a fun game as well. Should more teams, last question here, and then we'll get on to Pam's take on this game. Damon says, should all young teams take a page out of the Commanders' book and go for more fourth downs to increase variance? Increasing variance is obviously what underdogs should be looking to do. So if you are the underdog, I would go for it a little bit more frequently. If you are the favorite, I would still be going for it when the math tells you to go for it. You refer to the statistics, the analytics that say when you go for it and you get guided by that, you have a crutch. You have the assistance of the math that says this is optimal situation to go for it. This is a situation when you shouldn't go for it. And I like it how there's some people out there that say, oh, well, the math always says that you should go for it. You know, the math always said, like the data where they pop it up on the screen. I've never seen a situation where they don't go for it. Yeah, you know why that's the case is because most of the time the team that's out there on the field that's deciding to go for it has referred to the math and said we are going to go for it. So then you pop up the graphic, oh, the math says it's to their advantage. Well, no shit. That's why they're out there doing it. Why don't you, if you popped up the math every time the team is punting the ball, I would bet that the math for the vast majority of the time says that it's not a good time to go for it. So what do you think the graphics is going to say when the team's actually going for it? They've consulted with the math. It's like one of the dumbest things I hear some of these commentators, not just analysts, like on their daytime shows, talking about, oh, it seems like the math always says to go for it. Bring up the math graphic on the situations where it's 4th and 10 and they've got their punt unit out there, but they never bring up those graphics because they're punting the ball. So that's a silly thing to talk about. All right, let's bring on Pam, then I'll get to a few more of your questions on this game. Let's hear what Pam's take is on the Washington Commanders versus the Philadelphia Eagles.
For this week, I'm looking at the game totals for both matchups. From a side perspective, I want to be a fan, so I'm looking at the game total, looking over on 47.5 between the Commanders and the Eagles. If I like an over in a matchup, then I'm looking at both teams. This starts with Saquon Barkley's dominance. Philadelphia's running back has been a one-man wrecking crew all season long, and Washington has been on the receiving end of that wrath twice. In their first two matchups this year, Barkley rushed 146 in the first game, another 150 in the second. Washington simply just doesn't have the personnel to contain him. Honestly, I'm not sure any team in the league does. But if you look at why, because the Commanders are 28th in success rate allowed to running backs. They're 26 in touchdowns surrendered to running backs. Their front seven has been plagued by poor tackling and a lack of push up front. And against the NFL's best offensive line, well, that's a big recipe for a disaster. Barkley isn't just efficient, he's been explosive all season long. He holds the record for the most 20-plus yard touchdown runs in a single season in the 2000s. Oh, and by the way, he's coming off a 205 barn burner performance against the Rams. Over his last 4 games, Barkley has averaged 160 rushing yards per game. With this kind of production, Philadelphia should have no problem putting up points early and often. Now, I also like Jaden Daniels, the rookie who doesn't flinch. Daniels has been the spark for Washington's offense. His poise under pressure has been nothing short of elite. He leads the NFL in fourth quarter scoring. A rookie leads the NFL in fourth quarter scoring, ranks third in passer rating during crunch time. His completion rate is 71%, is in high leverage situations, is fourth best in the league. He's averaging 8 YPA to close out games. But it's not just his arm. We know that his dual threat ability really just adds such a different a whole new dimension to this offense. Look at what he did against Detroit in the divisional round. 81 rushing yards and countless plays where he extended the drives. That's key for a Philadelphia defense that's 24th in fourth down stops. Plus, Washington leads the NFL in points per drive on the road this season, and that number jumped in the postseason. Daniels and this Commanders offense have been relentless. 28 points off turnovers in these playoffs while avoiding mistakes of their own. 0 turnovers and only 1 sack allowed. I like the over because aggression equals points. Washington's aggressive mindset has been a game changer this postseason. They've gone for it on fourth down 9 times, converting 6 of those. On the season, the Commanders are 81% conversion rate on fourth down. That leads the league. Sustained drives mean more scoring opportunities, and with the Commanders playing the underdog role, they're going to need to stay aggressive in order to keep pace with Eagles and Barkley. Philadelphia has rushed over 200 yards in both matchups against Washington. They're second in the league in turnover margin at plus 17, so turnovers are going to potentially create shorter fields for either side. Easy points. Over 47.5 in Commanders at the Eagles. I also like for the one prop is Jaden Daniels to have at least two passing touchdowns at plus money, plus 120. You can't run on the Eagles, but you can pass. Philadelphia has been a brick wall against rushing touchdowns this season. 5th in rushing scores allowed, but they've been a floodgate against passing scores. It is a red zone liability for the Eagles defense. 27th in opponent passing touchdown percentage. The Eagles' strong run defense forces teams to go more airborne. Who's equipped to go airborne? McLaurin, Daniels, that connection. Woo! While they're decent at limiting yardage, the Eagles, they're struggling to stop big plays and passing scores, especially against quarterbacks who can exploit their secondary. Daniels, as a rookie, definitely can. Enter Daniels. Red hot, throwing 2 or more touchdowns in 7 of his last 8 games. He thrives under pressure and knows how to capitalize inside the red zone, exactly where Philly's defense tends to crumble. So that plays right into Daniels' strength. So at plus 120, that says value to me. So I like the Commanders at Eagles over 47.5. And for the one player prop, Jaden Daniels, 2+ passing touchdowns at plus 120.
All right, so there you go. Pam likes the over in the Commanders game at 47.5, which is the number right now. And by the way, I just got word Cam Jurgens with his back injury, Dallas Goedert with his ankle injury, both are practicing today. Both have been either DNP or limited the last 2 days. I'm not 100% positive, but both of those guys are back in the lineup. I'm not sure what was going on with Cam Jurgens' back, so to speak. I know that the Philadelphia Eagles, certainly one of those teams, and I think more teams should be doing this as long as the NFL allows them to play games, so to speak, with that injury report, just give the other team a little bit of something to think about. So absolutely not sure if the Cam Jurgens thing came out of nowhere, thin air, or was massively serious or just a rest type situation. But both of those guys look like they're certainly going to be ready to roll at 100% for the game against the Washington Commanders. And those are some of the bets that Pam likes. Now, we are going to bring on Joe Gibbs, our NFL referee expert, to talk about the ref in this game. I've got my takes on the ref in this game as well. I'll save those for that point in time, but we'll get to that momentarily. I did tweet out, though. Actually, I'll go ahead and share this because I didn't realize this. It was fired out. Last night I was working. I've been working pretty late the last I always do this, but I've been working even later at night, even though there's fewer games. And so on occasion, I might schedule a tweet and don't realize it was sent out. But the referee for this game, I tweeted this earlier today, scheduled it last night. Shawn Hochuli is the ref for Washington and Philly. In his game earlier this year with Washington, Washington was called for 13 penalties for 108 yards. Atlanta was called for only 4 penalties for 25 yards. So massive penalties, a lot of offensive holding, which we'll talk with Joe Gibbs about, against the Washington Commanders in that game, called by Shawn Hochuli. Remember, he's the ref that's most likely to call that offensive holding. He's the one standing right there behind the quarterback, watching that offensive line and all those linemen as to whether or not they're grabbing and tugging or holding. So he called a ton of that. On this crew, it's like an all-star crew. They bring some guys from other crews for the postseason, I guess, to reward them. Once again, we'll talk to Joe about this, is a guy named Alex Kemp. Some of those guys from this crew that are going to be doing this game worked on Alex Kemp's crew. Alex Kemp's crew also had a Washington Commanders game. That game was against, I might be getting these backwards. And anyway, one of them was against the New Orleans Saints, where Washington was called for 9 penalties for 84 yards, where the Saints were called for only 4 penalties for 36 yards. So both of these games, that key crew members that are going to be refereeing this game against the Philadelphia Eagles have done Washington Commanders games earlier this year, and they called double the penalties against the Commanders that they called on other teams. And we know that the Philadelphia Eagles are like 6-0 with Shawn Hochuli as the referee. So things certainly aren't looking positive for the Commanders in that regard. Plus, they're without Sam Cosmi, who's like their best offensive lineman, and now they're going up against one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. So a lot of difficulty for the Commanders. All right, let's talk about this key AFC championship game, the Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, so got my notes here. Got pages of notes right up for the game that I haven't posted yet. A lot of other information to dig through here. But one of the keys that I think in this game, I'm not going to run through this whole thing. I've talked about this before about the Kansas City Chiefs, and I was wondering if it was going to be last week. It turned out it wasn't last week. I'm now wondering if it's going to be this week. But this offense has been the best Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes offense in their tenure since 2018 at making trips into the red zone. And it may not seem like that because they're not a high-flying team. They're not throwing the ball over the top. They're not getting a bunch of chunk plays, not putting up a ton of points. They have gotten the ball into the red zone at the highest rate, 40% of drives. That's not only the best in the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes era since 2018, it is also the second best in the NFL this year. The issue is that they're not converting down inside of the red zone, where they're converting only 54% of the time, which is an all-time low under Andy Reid with the Kansas City Chiefs. Last week versus the Houston Texans, Kansas City Chiefs took 56% of drives into the red zone. They scored touchdowns in only 40% of those drives. That ranked number 8 out of 14 teams in the postseason in terms of their rate of red zone conversions into touchdowns. It's been terrible. So they made the trips into the red zone. They're just not converting them. Now, the Buffalo Bills defense has allowed 36% of opponent drives to reach the red zone. I mentioned that the Kansas City Chiefs are getting to the red zone on 40%, and that was the second best rate of any offense this year. The Buffalo Bills defense is allowing 36%. That's the third worst defense in the NFL this year. So they're allowing the third most drives to reach the red zone, and the Chiefs offense is taking the second most drives into the red zone. I think this Buffalo Bills defense has really not been tested very frequently by good offenses. They have played a schedule of offenses that's outside the top 10, and anytime they've seemed to step up against a decent offense, they have allowed trips to the red zone. They have allowed opportunities to score points. whether it was the Detroit Lions who scored 42, whether it was the LA Rams who scored 44, whether it was the Baltimore Ravens who scored 35 in the first game and then did not punt once in the AFC Championship game or AFC Divisional Round game last week, despite having no number one wide receiver available to them. It seems to me like the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have opportunities to move the ball down the field against this Buffalo Bills defense. The question becomes, can they score? And they're going to need to. And at some point, it's got to click. We always talk about the red zone as this one area on the field that plays so much into the final result of games, just like turnovers sometimes do. They play so much, but you really shouldn't necessarily look at red zone efficiency as a key metric when you're studying teams, because it should vary so much. What you want to focus in on is what the team does on the other 80 yards of the football field, rather than just those final 20 yards. Because most of the time, if a team is great over the other 80 yards of the field, a few variance games go wrong against them. Their red zone offense doesn't look that great, but they're probably going to be, I mean, they're one of the better offenses in the league over the other 80 yards. They're probably going to be a good offense inside of the red zone. Similarly, you could have a bad offense over 80 yards, get lucky down inside of the red zone, and they look a lot better, but you really need to pump your brakes on a team like that, because chances are if they're bad over the other 80 yards, they're not going to have a great red zone offense. It's not as if there are some teams out there. I remember some of the Bruce Arians offenses. No risk it, no biscuit. These types of teams that chuck the ball deep down the field, that rely on the big chunk plays. Those types of offenses might be better over the other 80 yards of the field. But then when they get into that condensed space where the defense doesn't have to defend the big passes over the top, it becomes a lot easier for those defenses. And then it becomes a lot harder for the offenses of like a Bruce Arians to try to attack, because you cannot throw the ball deep down the field. You cannot work it over the top. So some of those offenses struggled more than you might expect down inside of the red zone, because that's not the way that they were built. They were built to attack you deep down the field, use the deep routes to open things up underneath. And when you can't use the deep routes or attack over the top, then they're playing with one arm tied behind their back. That's the odd thing about this Kansas City Chiefs offense. They're taking the lowest rate of deep shots. Patrick Mahomes has been terrible throwing the ball over 20 yards down the field. That's not their style of offense right now. So the fact that they tend to play in a condensed offense themselves, they like to pass the ball a lot, but they're playing short. This is the exact type of offense that should be very successful inside of the red zone. This is the type of offense that if they're the second best offense in the NFL at getting to the red zone, because they're moving the ball and they're not punting it and they're having efficiency on a down-to-down basis, getting first downs and marching the ball to the red zone, I would think that they would also have success inside of the red zone. There's nothing that stands out as glaring to me about this offense, the way that it's structurally designed, that they should be as bad in the red zone as they are. So I think it's just a matter of time for this team to perform well. And when they do, all of a sudden the 23 to 24 points that they might be putting up per game, if you look at the per game scoring of this team, it's pretty shocking in terms of like how frequently they're not even getting anywhere close to scoring 30 points in any games. But once some of those red zone conversions start to go their way, this team is mid to upper 30s, and they could be this week. It just comes down, it's kind of like the Washington Commanders. Is that fourth down variance going to go their way like it has most of the season? Or is this going to be finally the week that it's not going to go their way? Because they're going to try a bunch of fourth downs against the Philadelphia Eagles for sure. That's what makes it hard to handicap a Washington Commanders game, is because something's been happening that shouldn't happen at that rate. Do you keep betting the trend, or do you bet that it's going to revert back to the mean? It's the same sort of thing with the Kansas City Chiefs offense inside of the red zone. They should be more efficient than they are. At some point, it's going to revert back to the mean. But for right now, you could continue handicapping them that they're putting up the same point totals as what they've done most of the season, because they aren't having that success down inside of the red zone. And I'm not sure when it is going to come back, but at some point, it should. It's either this week or in the Super Bowl if they get there, if they beat the Buffalo Bills. The other thing about this game that I find interesting, staying on this side of the ball, is the Buffalo Bills pressure rate or lack thereof. If you look back to the Kansas City Chiefs and the offenses that they've played down the sort of stretch run, the defenses they've played down the stretch run, the Kansas City Chiefs have played the Browns, the Texans, the Steelers, the Broncos, and the Texans again from December 15th onward. That's 5 games. Their last 5 games, that's who they've played. Those teams, in terms of pass rush efficiency, all ranked top 10. Those defenses have top 10 pass rushes. The Browns, the Texans, the Steelers, the Broncos, and the Texans again. All top 10 pass rushes. The Buffalo Bills, though they have a top 10 pass rush win rate, rank 23rd in pressure rate this season. They rank 16th in the rate of sacks generated per pressure that they register. So they're getting pressure at a bottom 10 rate, and then they're only league average at actually getting a sack when they do get pressure. They also rank below average in havoc rate, which is the rate at which a defense records a sack, an interception, a tackle for loss, a forced fumble, a pass breakup on a per play basis. Since week 10, this Bills defense ranks 31st in havoc rate. 31st. That's terrible. So my concern for the Buffalo Bills defense here is you're going up against a team that is really good at moving the ball into the red zone, and your defense has been the 3rd worst at allowing teams to move the ball into your red zone. And you really have only played a handful of top 10 teams at moving the ball into the red zone. Most of the teams that you've played rank average to below average at doing this. Kansas City Chiefs rank 2nd best in the NFL. And if you're trying to keep them out of the red zone, you need to try to get a little bit of pressure on Patrick Mahomes. But the Buffalo Bills are a massive step down for this Kansas City Chiefs offensive line at dealing with pressure. The Chiefs have been used to dealing with, for the last 5 games over the last month, teams that rank really good, top 10 at pressuring opposing quarterbacks. And now you're going up against the Buffalo Bills, which have struggled to do that quite recently. The Buffalo Bills pass defense, when they do get pressure, they're the 5th best pass defense over the second half of the season. They are holding opposing quarterbacks to minus 0.52 EPA per attempt when pressure is registered. But when pressure is not registered, they're the worst pass defense in the NFL, allowing plus 0.46 EPA per attempt. So if you struggle to get pressure, and the Chiefs have been dealing with good pressure units, and now you're stepping down, and now you rank 32nd if you're not getting pressure, that's a problem. The Bills' injuries, as Cash Campbell says, there are some. It's crazy to me. I think I have it here, though. Last year, when these two teams played, let me see, do I have it here? You should look at if it is notable that the Bills have these couple of injuries that they're dealing with. I think Benford has a concussion. I thought he might be trending to play, but he still is in concussion protocol, and it's Friday. And he missed practice for what was being referred to as a personal reason today. Teron Johnson, who was downgraded yesterday from full to limited, was back, I think, to full today. So Johnson's going to be playing. Taylor Rapp is obviously out. They've already announced earlier today that Taylor Rapp is out. Matt Milano is going to play. So it looks like Milano and Johnson, these are the question marks earlier. Milano and Johnson are playing. Milano's interesting because they have been using him to sort of mirror Patrick Mahomes and to prevent Patrick Mahomes from getting those back-breaking scrambles down the field. The problem, which is one of the reasons why Patrick Mahomes, I think he only had like 1 rushing attempt maybe in the earlier game against the Buffalo Bills. But the problem, or maybe it was 0. But the problem with what they did earlier in their 30-21 victory, the Bills' victory this season during the regular season, was to sort of tip their hand at like how they're going to defend Patrick Mahomes. So now Andy Reid knows this is how they're going to defend us, and they can start scheming some other ways around that. If I'm Andy Reid, though, I'm looking at this Buffalo Bills team, and you guys know this. The Buffalo Bills want to be a run-first team, right? In 2022, the Buffalo Bills were passing the ball early downs, first 3 quarters, so designed intent of the offense. Early downs, first 3 quarters of games, not worrying about game state in the fourth quarter on third down. 64% pass rate. That was number 2 most pass heavy in the NFL in 22. In 23, they dropped to 57% pass rate from 64. That was number 9 in the NFL. This year, they dropped to 55% pass rate, which is number 13 in the NFL. And in the playoffs, they've played 2 games, early downs in the first 3 quarters. They're down from 55% in the regular season down to 38% in the playoffs. You can say, well, hey, look, they were up against the Denver Broncos. Well, they weren't really. They were up by 3 at halftime. You could say, hey, they were up by 11 over the Baltimore Ravens. Yeah, but Baltimore scored on their first possession in the second half. Okay, fine. Let's get rid of that third quarter. I was only including the third quarter. Let's get rid of that. Let's just look at the first half. In the first half, they were only 35% dropback rate on early downs. That's the most run-heavy team of any team in the postseason. There's 14 teams, the most run-heavy team. And they've been consistently moving more and more run-heavy. From 64% 22 to 57% in 23 to 55% in 24, down to 35% on early downs in the first half of games in the 2024 playoffs. What can a team that wants to run the ball a ton not do if they're losing by double digits at halftime? Run the ball. So if you're Andy Reid, in my opinion, you got to come out with your hair on fire, or more appropriately for him with his mustache on fire, trying to get points scored early in this game against the Buffalo Bills. Because if you do that, and this is the fun thing about the Bills, which is what I want to see. I want to see what they do when they get down. I want to see Josh Allen unleashed more. This is kind of my criticism about the Baltimore Ravens game plan against the Buffalo Bills just a week ago. It's not to say that Buffalo can't come back into this game throwing the football with Josh Allen because he is their single greatest weapon. However, this is a team that wants to run the ball, and their coaching staff probably all week has been talking about running the football in this game and keeping Patrick Mahomes on the sideline. And if you come out and you get a big lead, all of a sudden that coaching staff and that team, it's like, oh crap, we got to pivot. We're in trouble. Now they start. It's not that they just are going to pass the ball more, which obviously they will have to, and they got a good quarterback, so that might not be the end of the world. What's going to happen? They are going to start pressing. They are going to play a little bit more nervously, potentially a little bit more frantically. And what is the one thing that Josh Allen has done so well this year is not make those backbreaking mistakes, not make those bad decisions. Why? Because they're running the ball so well and they're ahead in games, and so he hasn't been forced to do that. But when you put him back into the situation where he is playing at a deficit in that third quarter, there's a very good chance in my mind that, a Bugs Bunny meme, it's time for me to go back to being the old me. That's what Josh Allen might end up having to do here. And they could come back and win the game as a result of it. He could also throw an interception and have a fumble just like Lamar Jackson did. And that's part of the issue that I had with the Ravens game. And I mentioned this on the Tuesday show this past week. You could say the Ravens didn't punt the ball at all, but the Ravens did turn the ball over 3 times. And in 2 of those, it was Lamar Jackson's fault. And on those 2 plays that they turned the ball over for Lamar Jackson's fault, those were called pass plays. And the reason they were called pass plays is because the first down plays failed. And not on first down and not on second down did they run their quarterback. And not on any play in the game did they call a designed run for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's legs are one of the single most dangerous weapons of any quarterback or any player in the entire NFL. And yet the Baltimore Ravens chose themselves not to call any designed runs here. And obviously we know that's not going to be the case with the Buffalo Bills. They are going to call some designed runs for Josh Allen. That's what they've been doing. But the more that you can incorporate Josh Allen into this game, the more dangerous you become as an offense, in my opinion, for the Buffalo Bills. So I'm really going to be fascinated to see if they come out, they try to run the ball and play slow like they've been doing with James Cook and try to convert these third downs. Does that work? Or do they end up punting the ball back? Then the Chiefs drive down into the red zone like these statistics show, and they end up converting touchdowns. And all of a sudden now you're down and you got to pass the ball, and you got a good quarterback to do that, but he starts pressing a little bit, knowing the stakes are so high. So I think that's going to be a fascinating aspect of this. On the other side of the ball, I've talked a lot about when the Chiefs have the ball because it's just a great matchup to discuss. But on the other side of the ball, I mean, I certainly think that the Buffalo Bills are in a very good situation here offensively because I just don't know how good this Chiefs defense is. The Chiefs defense is getting a little bit healthier, and they haven't had any catastrophic losses really from a player perspective situation. But they have struggled a little bit with their run defense over the last couple of weeks, and they have been playing nothing but below average rushing attacks from weeks 13 to 17. Don't count week 18 because that was a game they didn't play their starters. The Chiefs have played the number one easiest schedule of rushing attacks from week 13 onward. Here's the rushing attacks that they have played and what they rank. Number 32 Raiders, number 28 Steelers, number 26 Browns, number 25 Texans twice, and number 18 Chargers. Now they're going up against the Buffalo Bills, who ranked number 7 this season. Spencer Brown, the right tackle, did not play in that first game. The interesting aspect to Spencer Brown being back for the Buffalo Bills is the fact that the Bills like to run to the right end more than any other gap that they run towards. And they have a ton of efficiency when doing so. If I'm looking at the numbers here, which I have them written down here somewhere. Let's see, where are my Spencer Brown numbers? Okay, here we go. Running to the right end, Spencer Brown's the right tackle. Running to the right end this season, the Bills averaged, aside from the game versus the Chiefs earlier this year where they did not have Spencer Brown, they averaged 5.6 yards per carry, which is the best in the NFL. They averaged plus 0.11 EPA per rush attempt, which was the best in the NFL. And they delivered 46% success, which was the second best in the NFL. But the Chiefs ran to the right end versus the Bills only 5 times of their 19 running back runs. Those 5 runs gained a total of 6 yards, 1.2 yards per carry, minus 0.28 EPA per rush, 20% success. With Spencer Brown back, they're going to be able to run the ball more frequently. I got to move this out of the way here a little bit. They're going to be able to run the ball more frequently, and they're going to be able to run the ball more successfully to that right end than they did before and not play as much left-handed. Obviously, they still won the game 30-21 against the Chiefs. And that number 7 ranking doesn't include Josh Allen running the football. When you look at Josh Allen running the football, I mean, look at some of these quarterbacks who have run the football, scrambled the football rather, against this Kansas City Chiefs defense over the last several weeks. I mean, Russell Wilson had 6 rushes for 55 yards. This is just quarterback scrambles. Bo Nix had 5 for 51 yards. CJ Stroud last week had 5 for 43 yards. And none of those quarterbacks, Bo Nix, CJ Stroud, Russell Wilson, none of them are as good scrambling the football or as dangerous as Josh Allen is. So, I mean, there is upside to get the run going, to get the short pass game going, to open things up potentially here. I could give you guys 20 more minutes on the way that Steve Spagnuolo played Josh Allen previously, reduced his man rate and reduced his blitz rate last season. In the regular season, he blitzed Josh Allen at 32% clip, dropped that down to only 18% in the postseason, played man coverage against Josh Allen in the regular season at a 42% clip, dropped that all the way down to 13%, employed more too high defense against Josh Allen in the postseason, tried to get him to hold on to the football more frequently, and Josh Allen did and struggled with it. But how Josh Allen against that same defensive coverage, which is no blitz and too high coverage in the regular season this year, when Spags employed that, taking what he did in the postseason last year with success, rolled it over to the regular season in 2024 against Josh Allen. Josh Allen went 13 of 15 for plus 0.22 EPA per attempt. Had a lot more success, was getting rid of the ball faster, shorter, more decisively, and with more success. And a lot of those targets were going to Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel. I could go into like a lot of levels with this, but we don't have the time. What we need to do right now is bring on Joe Gibbs. We got Pam. I guess Joe's waiting privately. I don't know. With this new system that we're on, I cannot see the private chat and the comments at the same time. So Joe's been apparently waiting here since 12:25. So I'm going to bring on Joe. We'll get to Pam later because Joe's been very patient. Hopefully he's still here. Joe, is Joe still here? Do we have the graphic for the referee transition from Jimmy? There we go. And we got Joe.
All right.
I'm sure you've had a chance to go, get some food, go hunting from Australia. Maybe you killed a humongous spider, grilled them up for lunch, whatever you did, you like to do over there. But you're back now. I appreciate you waiting patiently for me here. Why don't you break down? Let's start with the Commanders game against the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a ref, Shawn Hochuli, that we know very well. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about his track record with the Commanders or the Philadelphia Eagles this season, the guys that are on his staff. I got a couple questions for you after you break this one down, but give us your take on this game and what we might see from a referee perspective and who you think that favors.
Yeah, so if I'm the Commanders' ownership, I'm furious that Hochuli was assigned to this game to begin with. And as you touched on back in week 15, the Commanders at the Saints. Commanders were up 22-13. Hochuli, they screwed up the clock at the end of the game. The Saints had a big passing play down the field. The clock stopped for some reason. It allowed the Saints to spike the ball, run a play, and score a touchdown as the clock expired. And then they went for two, and they eventually did not get that. But that was a major screw-up, especially if you bet the game. But just from a Washington perspective, you've got this guy that almost screwed us over, less than 6 weeks ago. Now you've got him on this game, the biggest game of the year for us. I would not be happy about that. But as far as the Hochuli crew itself, yes, he's the head referee. And around that line of scrimmage, you've got Hochuli, as you noted, Alex Kemp, and Clay Martin. And so the key points here, Hochuli and Martin ranked 1 and 2 respectively for offensive penalties this season. And then as far as the all-important offensive holding, these guys, Martin, Kemp, and Hochuli ranked 1, 2, and 5 respectively, calling that particular penalty. And when I dug into the numbers here, I knew that Washington had issues with Hochuli and Kemp in those respective games. I double check this, and then I quadruple check this just to make sure my numbers were correct. 48% of the Washington offensive holding penalties this year have come in 2 games. Hochuli with the Saints hosting the Commanders, and then Kemp with the Commanders hosting the Falcons on Sunday Night Football. 2 games, 48% of their offensive holding penalties this season. So that's not good. Now, I think they do tone it down in the playoffs because they traditionally do, so that's the positive for Washington. But when you've got that trio up front monitoring the line of scrimmage, it's not good. The Eagles themselves, I've seen this plastered all over social media this week. The Eagles in the Sirianni-Hurts era, 6-0 with Shawn Hochuli, and that is true, but people don't give context to it, and that's what drives me crazy, and that's why we do the best coverage. The reason being, in my opinion, as I just pointed to, the focus on the offensive side of the ball, what would be the best thing to combat that? A good offensive line. What do the Eagles have? A great offensive line. So it makes sense that a team with a great offensive line is able to combat the Hochuli officiating and win because of that. Whereas if they're going against an opponent that struggles on the offensive line, over the course of a game, that does add up. And in fact, in those 6 games, the Eagles have a +2 penalty advantage over their opponents. And those are primarily in that offensive holding false start region. So these things all add up. The game itself, I've liked Philadelphia throughout the playoffs. I like them here. But they've been their own worst enemy at times. They let Green Bay hang around. They definitely let the Rams hang around last week and easily could have lost that. I think they control the game on Sunday, but it would not surprise me if the same thing happens where it looks like Philly's got the game under control then you look up in the fourth quarter with 6 minutes left, and Washington has a chance to win. I don't know what you think, but those are the officiating numbers on this game.
It's pretty crazy. I would agree that I do not understand why the league would stick a ref who made a massive blunder like that almost lost the team a game. And it wasn't just a small mistake. It was a colossal mistake with the game clock. After the game came out, they admitted that he made a mistake, but there was nothing you could do about it. There was no way to go back and review it. But that game should have been over when they spiked that ball down with 3 seconds left. They should not have been allowed the Saints to get off an extra play. And the fact that they did and scored a touchdown and then almost beat the Commanders on a 2-point conversion attempt was absolutely unbelievable in real time. But seeing this ref then get assigned to this very same game, like you said, and not even a half a season later, when all these other refs have opportunities to get assigned to it, because you're only really holding one guy back, right? Like one guy next week, you're not going to stick on this crew. So you could literally stick any other of the referees in the stable on this game, except for the one who's doing the AFC Championship, and you choose this guy.
Yes.
I don't think it seems suspicious, but it's got to be very frustrating if you're the Commanders.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm Josh, I'm not sure the fellow's name, but yeah, I'm raising holy hell about this, but too late now. He's on the game.
Yeah, it is too late. And you're right. So what Joe is saying is that the reason that the Eagles, and this is an important distinction, the Eagles are 6-0 with Shawn Hochuli, but the reason the Eagles might be better with Shawn Hochuli is because he focuses on the offensive line, and the Eagles tend not to commit as many penalties because they've got great players along that offensive line, whereas their opponents don't have as good offensive line, probably get flagged for more penalties, which then helps the Eagles because a penalty on a 1st and 10, setting up a 1st and 20 is almost as bad as a sack. Like taking a offensive holding penalty on any drive almost in every case kills that drive. That is one of the worst things that you could take. And that is going to be a big time impact here when you've got Jalen Carter going up against a backup for Sam Cosmi and his Washington Commanders team with an offensive line that wasn't even as good as what the Philadelphia Eagles had, even if Sam Cosmi was healthy. All right, let's talk about the second game, Joe. The second game, we've got obviously the Buffalo Bills traveling to Kansas City to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are 1 win away from being in the Super Bowl with a chance to be the first team ever to have that three-peat in consecutive years with Super Bowl championships. The referee on this game, you're going to talk a little bit about what his influence is and his impact is on the way that you think that this game could be played out. Why don't you give us a breakdown on this referee and what you think he's going to call in this game and how you think it might help us determine who could win this game?
Yeah, so Clete Blakeman, the head referee, and again, this has been publicized pretty well throughout the course of the week. I can tell you right now, it wasn't by accident that Clete Blakeman got this gig, okay? There's 17 options to have that game. The NFL wasn't sitting in the office on Park Avenue with a wheel and spinning the wheel, and it just happened to land on Clete Blakeman, and they're like, yep, let's go with him. I ran through every metric you could to put forth the narrative that it's not a pro-Chiefs crew to sort of to squash that talk. Blakeman checked every single box. He was the only one that you could have had to do that. I can tell you why. Home teams in NFL was 5-11 with Blakeman this season. The Blakeman crew ranked number 1, calling penalties on the home team, 53.5%. The Chiefs' record in the home era is not very good with Blakeman, whereas Buffalo's is. And then home teams in the playoffs with Blakeman, they're 7-5 straight up, 3-9 against the spread, favored by an average of 5 points in those contests. So you add all that up, you cannot have this build up to the game after what happened last week and say, oh my God, the NFL set this up for the Chiefs to win. It's the exact opposite of that. So you imagine if they put John Hussey on this game, who's a great home field referee. Can you imagine the groundswell after the game last week with the Texans and the Chiefs? Hussey's on the game, the best home field referee. It would just be endless build up to the game of, this is rigged, this is this is that. Blakeman squashes that. So the NFL didn't do it by accident. I know that for a fact. There's no way they could have done this by accident. No way. So The crew itself, you got Blakeman around the line of scrimmage. Blakeman, 2 Hochuli crew members, and a Shawn Smith crew member. So the contentious calls this past few weeks, unnecessary roughness and roughing the passer. We all saw it last Saturday. So here's the deal. Blakeman's crew this season ranks number 1 for unnecessary roughness. Shawn Smith, who will be monitored, one of his crew members monitoring the line of scrimmage, they ranked number 1 last year and top 5 this year. And then roughing the passer, the Hochuli crew's got that covered, and you have 2 Hochuli crew members on this game. They ranked 2nd, 1st, and 3rd the last 3 years, respectively. So you've got all those penalty areas covered. I don't know if they're going to call them or not. I think they try to let them play. I don't think the league wants this to continue, this narrative. But that's just my opinion. I could be dead wrong. And we see those flags come out on Sunday. The teams themselves, I mean, you've covered this, and you guys cover it from every angle as far as all the different metrics and stuff. To me, it's just, we've seen this before. We've seen Buffalo win in the regular season, and then in the playoffs, they come up empty. So at this stage, it's more a psychological thing for them. And I still think that 13-second game haunts them. It's just one of those things. You got to show me you can do it. Actually, forget about me. I'm just a guy talking about the game. They need to show themselves they can do it. Because you think about it, if Buffalo loses again this week, that mental hurdle to overcome going forward, it's almost impossible. I like the Chiefs just because I've seen them do it time and time again. Buffalo, I've seen them come up short time and time again. I'd like to see Buffalo get there, but there's no way I could put money on them in this situation.
You're right. I think it is a good move by the league to try to squash some of those, the potential that, hey, they put a ref on this game who favors the Chiefs. It'll come down to ultimately, though, what does this crew actually end up calling? What do they actually call? And I will tell you this, as much as we rag on Patrick Mahomes for calls, having watched a lot of Bills games too, and Bills fans going to get upset with this, both of these guys are going to be looking for calls. Both Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes turn to those officials, or I can't tell you how many demonstrative times these quarterbacks are like holding their hands out, pointing at, like it's the LeBron James meme, holding his hand is like, what call this? What's going on here? Just exasperation at the referees from both of these quarterbacks. And so it's going to be a battle of which of these guys does this most convincingly, but hopefully we take all of that out of the picture. With this crew, hopefully they remove the vast majority of that, and we just get football. We don't get theatrics. I think that's what all of us are hoping for, is less theatrics and more football. We're
going to know kind of early, I think. Look, the league's giving instructions. These guys aren't going out there and winging it on their own. The league's probably giving them instructions. Pull things back. We don't want the controversy. Let them play. I think that's what they're going to do, is let them play. That's just my opinion, but we'll find out Sunday. We don't know till the game kicks off.
Yeah, we won't. And I know you have a slightly different theory on this. My theory is I want the same types of penalties to be called all season long by the crews. I want all the crews to be as similar as possible, and I want a penalty to be called a penalty and a non-penalty not to be flagged, whether it's a conference championship game or if it's a Super Bowl. And I know you tend to lean a little bit more towards it's okay to let them play a little bit more in these big games. We don't want as many flags, just let them play. So we'll see if they end up like keeping the flags in their pocket. If they do that, let me just ask you this, Joe. In this particular game between the Chiefs and the Bills, if the refs do hold on to the flags a little bit more, if the league has instructed that, so that we're not going to get maybe some of these roughing the passers, but we also might not get quite as many offensive holding, and we also might not get quite as much defensive holding, let's say. Which team do you think that benefits more overall?
I think the Chiefs, because offensive holding has been their issue all season, as it was last season. If you remember back to last postseason, offensive holding essentially disappeared from the Kansas City box score. That's the penalty equivalent of a sack. It's the most high volume penalty, and it's their problem area. So if the league does let them play and offensive holding declines because of that, it definitely favors the Chiefs.
Okay. So let's see what happens there. But great stuff as always, Joe. Good luck in whatever you end up betting on here for this conference championship round. And of course, we'll have Joe back for the Super Bowl. You guys can follow Joe. Here's his handle on X if you want to get more information from him. The best analysis in the business as it relates to referees. He writes a weekly article for us up at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Make sure that you head over to sharpfootballanalysis.com and you can check out that article for sure. Okay, we've got a couple more things to get into here, one of which is going to be getting Pam's take and Pam's best bets on this Chiefs game. I want to mention two things real quick. First of all, we have 9 betting recommendations released for the conference championships. Might have something else coming out this afternoon, at least 1 or 2 things probably. We're 22-9 on postseason sides and totals this year. That's 72%. And on the season, a $100 better is up $16,164 since the start of the season. That includes futures, of which we do have a future here on the Chiefs to win the AFC Championship. So we've got plus 350 on those odds. Instead of taking the money line here, we have plus 350. And then we also teased with Ohio State the Buffalo Bills up to plus 8. So we've got the Bills plus 8. We got the Chiefs money line at plus 350, which neither of those numbers you can obviously attain right now to have success. So we're setting our subscribers up for a lot of success here this week, but we're still going to continue to add to that. We've got weekly packages for just $24. If you want to get on board for all of the props and bets that we have for the conference championship round, just $24. Use code SHOW76 to take 76% off of the weekly package. You can also use it to take $380 off the package through the Super Bowl. So we're 27-10 on Super Bowl plays, and we get to work Sunday night, like I mentioned, as soon as that game ends and the final score is finished for the Chiefs-Bills game. They post the line on the Super Bowl side in total. We're digging in, and we're coming back with sides, totals, or teasers, as well as props as quickly as they post those. So I look forward to the Super Bowl a ton. Speaking of the Super Bowl, one other thing to share with you guys, there's a couple of different contests that we're going to run here for the Super Bowl. This one is going to be the easiest for you to enter. It also is going to have some great prizes. The Super Bowl show that we're going to run, I'll give you a preview from a scheduling perspective as well. About a week and a half from now, probably next Tuesday or Wednesday, 2 Tuesdays or Wednesdays from now. So the Tuesday or Wednesday prior to the Super Bowl, we're going to run a Shark Tank show. It's going to feature me and 2 other guys, probably Rich and Ray, but we might have more, on a panel. And we're going to be the so-called sharks. We're going to call it the Sharp Tank. Obviously a pun on the website handle here, Sharp Football Analysis. We're going to call it the Sharp Tank. And what we're going to get is you guys to pitch us on your favorite prop. One favorite prop for the Super Bowl. You guys will have the opportunity to figure out a prop that you like, and you're going to get a chance to pitch it to us. If we select your prop as the best one, we're going to confer with one another live on the show. We're going to make a decision as to which prop we like the best. If we select your prop right there on the show, I don't know yet how much, it's either going to be $500 or $1,000. We're going to bet on that prop. I'll bet it in my apps live on the show. And if you win, if your prop hits, you'll get all that money. You'll get 100% of what I bet on that. You will get that cash. So you'll get all the profit from that ticket. The way that we're going to do this is we are going to get video submissions from you in advance so that we can then play them on the show. You are going to be able to record a video of yourself sitting there talking for 30 to 60 seconds about a prop you like and a couple of reasons why. Or you can just show game footage of a prop you like. Let's say you like, Patrick Mahomes rushing yards. You could just pull up a Patrick Mahomes rushing yard YouTube, do a screen record, but talk a little bit about why you like that prop. You're going to submit these props with 30 to 60 seconds of analysis and the prop. And then we're going to play them live on this show for the Sharp Tank podcast. So we're going to play each one of them. We're going to probably pick about 10 of these props. So you guys have the chance to submit these. We're going to play about 10 of these props live on our show. We're going to confer. There's going to be multiple panelists here, as I've already mentioned. We're going to decide which one we think has the best chance to win. We're going to live on the show put a bunch of money on that for you. And then if you win, we will pay you all that money. We'll send it over to you. So it's a fun contest. I think it's going to allow a lot of you guys to get involved and contribute. Cash Campbell says it's a great idea. When will this be? So we're going to do the show. We'll have more details published early next week, but we are going to do the show Tuesday or Wednesday prior to the Super Bowl. So in other words, not this upcoming Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm recording this on Friday in case you're watching it delayed on YouTube. I'm recording this on Friday. It's not going to be the Tuesday or Wednesday immediately after the conference championships when the field is set for the Super Bowl. We know who the two teams are. We need a little bit of time for the props to come out, the books to post their lines. And then you'll have the chance over the entire rest of that week, as well as next weekend, as well as Monday, to think of the prop. And we'll have a deadline, like a submission deadline, as to when you need to get your short little video in. We'll tell you where you send it to. We'll get you all this information later. But you'll just basically email over this 30 to 60 second quick video as to why you like a prop. And it doesn't have to, there's probably right now, there's no stipulations as to what type of prop it is. It could be a player prop. It could be a game prop. I don't know yet if we're going to make a stipulation or not. Maybe we'll make it so that it has to be a player prop. I'm not sure. But we're going to be running something like that. And we also might be running a contest where we are going to live on air do a combo pick where we'll combine a few of these onto like a sleeper ticket. So we might take your prop and a couple other props that we really like, combine them onto a sleeper ticket, and then give you a 20% profit boost on that if you go over to Sleeper and bet it over there. So we'll have a couple of ways that people can win and other people can get involved in this, but should be a lot of fun. And like I said, we haven't decided yet. We'll do either $500 or $1,000 we'll put onto that prop live on the show and give you guys all the profit. So Tom says he loves the idea. Sweet. Really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to it. Ryan says he likes it. I think he's referring to this. Exile likes it. So we thought of this idea pretty recently, and we're excited to share it with you guys and roll it out. And again, the show is going to feature multiple people. I'm not going to be the only one on it. We're going to have a bunch of other panelists. So it's going to really feel like Shark Tank, where you're coming into the studio presenting something that you want us to invest in. And then we literally will invest in that live on the show. And then we'll see when the game concludes if you guys won or lost that bet. And if you lost the bet, this is the only downside. If you lose the bet, then I'm out, $500 to $1,000. But it is what it is. That's part of the show. So we shall see how that goes. Okay. Now that we've done that, let's go over to Pam and let's talk to Pam, get her take on the Bills and the Chiefs AFC Championship game and her best bets in this one.
Sticking to the game totals, I'm going with the under 48 points between the Bills and the Chiefs. We've got two powerhouse teams that are going head-to-head, but this is not shaping up to be a shootout like you might expect because you have the two best quarterbacks in the league. I love the under 47.5 because the Bills' offense in the recent game against Baltimore, you probably noticed that Josh Allen's stat lines. He had 127 passing yards, no touchdowns. That's it. And it wasn't a one-off. He's kind of been in that realm all season. Buffalo's offense has shown a pattern of being overly conservative in the second half of games, especially if they're playing with the lead. They're leaning more on some of these methodical drives. Now, against a Steve Spagnuolo Chiefs defense, a guy who lives for confusing quarterbacks, disrupting game plans, the Bills' offense is could potentially fall into becoming one-dimensional. The Buffalo hasn't been generating explosive plays as often, and if Spagnuolo's pass rush gets going, it's going to be a really tough day for Allen to push the ball downfield. Now, KC's offense, listen, Patrick Mahomes is a magician. We know this. We know this about him. He pulls it out every year. But this year, his wand isn't working quite the same. Outside of Travis Kelce, who's really been the go-to guy that's been stepping up? The Chiefs against the Texans, only 212 total yards. Mahomes has struggled to connect on some of those deep passes, and Buffalo's secondary is disciplined enough to keep everything in front of them. Now, on top of that, KC's offensive line, particularly on that left side, has had some issues. And guess what? The Bills have a pass rush that can make life miserable for Mahomes. Add in KC's issues converting on third downs, add in their red zone inefficiency all season long, 24th in the league, and it's clear that the scoring potential here is capped. Now riddle me this. Think about it. When was the last time the Chiefs scored 30 points? November 2023. It's been a 28-game streak scoring 30 points or less. So what happens when you put these two offenses up against two disruptive defenses? Well, it's simple for me. You get a lower scoring game. That Bills defense is excellent at generating pressure without blitzing, which will disrupt Mahomes' rhythm. And on the flip side, Chiefs defense has the versatility to force Allen into mistakes or completely stall Buffalo's drives. Now here's one stat for you. Buffalo leads the NFL in turnover margin at plus 27. That's 10 more than the next highest team. Meanwhile, KC is 10th in points allowed per drive. These are two really good defenses. Both defenses are built to bend but not break, and that kind of game script, to me, that says under. But these are the two best offenses in the league. Okay, are they? Historically, but right now, the weaknesses are there. Buffalo has been conservative. KC has been inconsistent. The two player props that I like to match with this, I love Josh Allen, 10 rush attempts, to have at least 10 rush attempts at minus 105. In his last 9 games, Allen has averaged 8 rush attempts per game, leading the league in scramble rate. Now against man coverage, which is what the Chiefs like to play, that number spikes. He finds the gaps and he makes defenses pay. Buffalo leaned heavy into the strategy, 40 designed runs, 11 rushing scores in his last 9 games. Compare that to just 19 designed runs in the first half of the season. This is their game plan now. Use Allen's legs. And against Spagnola's Chiefs defense, Allen's even gone double-digit rush attempts in 6 straight games. Last time they met, 12 carries, 72 yards, 2 touchdowns. Allen's size, Allen's power, it's unstoppable. So bet the over on Josh Allen to have at least 10 rush attempts. He's carrying this offense on his back and his legs. The other player prop that I like is Xavier Worthy, over 49.5 receiving yards. He is a speedster, and he could definitely deliver in this game. Buffalo's defense has struggled against slot receivers, and Worthy's already burned them for 61 yards and a touchdown earlier this year. His speed, his separation, it makes him a go-to target for Mahomes, and so I love his over receiving yards. Xavier Worthy, over 49.5 receiving yards, because he's ready to fly, and even with playoff Kelsey in full effect, you need somebody else. Worthy is that guy. So the plays that I like for this one, the Bills and the Chiefs under 47.5. I also like Josh Allen to have at least 10 rush attempts, and Xavier Worthy over 49.5 receiving yards.
There we go. Several plays, one on the game, several props from Pam. And keep in mind, you guys can follow Pam over on X, as well as make sure that you are reading her articles and analysis. She's written these plays up, and they're posted up at sharpfootballanalysis.com. So if you want more information or analysis, just go over to sharpfootballanalysis.com, and you can search for her articles. They're going to be up there on the homepage as the weekend draws near. Of course, we also have a lot of other things up there. We're talking about the coaching changes. We're going to be talking very soon about some of the potential free agents that are available out there and coaching changes. While we were on the show here, we saw that the Houston Texans fired Bobby Slowik as offensive coordinator, which is a real fall from grace, so to speak, from Slowik, because, after what CJ Stroud did that first and rookie season of his, a lot of people are like, Bobby Slowik, next hot coaching candidate. Then he comes the next year and ends up not having the same amount of success. And guess what? He moves from being one of the hottest coaching candidates around, and obviously he took some interviews this past offseason as well, to being fired from his job. So this actually brings us full circle to the start of the show. Couldn't have planned it any better for me to share the similarities with Liam Cohen. So many people are out there with their just panties in a bunch, excuse the phrase, upset that that Liam Cohen would have not come back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and instead took this opportunity to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, even though he sort of agreed in principle but not yet signed anything with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is the exact reason why you would make a move like this. Bobby Slowik, Year one, CJ Stroud, success. Bobby Slowik, next year, CJ Stroud not quite as good. He's fired from his job. A hot candidate, potential offensive coordinator, moving to a head coach, all of a sudden is fired from his job the very next year. This is what could have happened to Liam Cohen. Great year, first season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, head coaching candidate, all of a sudden goes back to Tampa Bay. That offense doesn't look quite as good. Maybe Mike Evans doesn't play as well. There's a lot of different things that could have happened and be reasons why Tampa Bay Buccaneers might not have as much success in 2025. And all of a sudden, Liam Cohen goes from being a highly sought after potential head coaching candidate to somebody who could be looking for new work. Now, I'm not suggesting that that would have been the case, but these are the reasons why you take advantage of some of those opportunities, even though it might not be the most perfect situation or streamlined in the right way. My guess is if the Cons came to Liam Cohen and said, you could take this job, and we're also getting rid of our GM, Trent Baalke, that first go around, they would have had their head coach right there. It would have been clean. But because the Cons screwed around with this whole Trent Baalke, we're going to keep him, it would be suicidal to fire him, and then all of a sudden we're going to fire him, it obviously made Liam Cohen change his mind a ton. And they probably offered him more money, which who's going to, be quick to turn that down. So I could just say, it's hard to fault Liam Cohen that much, especially seeing this news today. The NFL is a harsh business. A lot of things happen super quickly in the NFL, especially as it relates to coaches. And you take your opportunities when you can get them. It's just like a running back in the NFL, right? We saw a young running back, I forget the guy's name, from Ohio State, who declared for the NFL this year. And I saw an astute point made by a former GM of the Green Bay Packers who said, with the way that running backs' lifespans exist in the NFL, it's important for these guys to get into the NFL as quickly as possible, to get to that second contract as quickly as possible. Because that first contract that you're going to sign, running backs aren't drafted number one, number two, etc. Running backs are drafted a little bit lower. They've been devalued a touch. You get brought in there, and then you become a workhorse for several years, and you're not going to be able to retire after that first contract. That rookie contract that you sign, that's not life-changing money. For some people, it's good money. Now we have to keep in mind that some of these running backs from college, they were making some money in college, right? With the deals that they were able to sign in college that they weren't, 10 years ago. They made a little bit of money, but that first deal that they signed, that's not going to be life-changing money. I can retire my parents. I can, we'll never have to worry about money ever again. It's good money, but it's that next deal that you sign. And so to get to that next deal as quickly as possible, that's what you need to do as quickly as possible. And now I see some other people. I just see a guy named David Hellman tweet out on X, Liam Cohen did nothing wrong. He just literally tweeted that 5 seconds ago. And this is exactly what I've just told you 5 minutes ago. This is why you take these types of jobs. So people need to get off their high horse with this whole righteousness. And I saw people talk about, well, the Bucs are the rest of the Buccaneer staff are full of integrity, right? You've got your Todd Bowles and your Brett Veach and the rest of that staff. Like, they're full of integrity. Like, come on now. These guys need to take their opportunities. Running backs need to take their opportunities. Players need to take their opportunities. Get paid when you can get paid, because you never know when you're not going to be able to get that type of money again. So, at any rate, let's see. Trent Baalke, Peter says Trent Baalke built that great Niners defense with Patrick Willis-Bowman. I mean, people can ride on their past laurels for a while. So it's not just me suggesting that Trent Baalke needed to be out of Jacksonville for them to get a good head coach in there. Literally every person who's a talking head in the NFL with connections, as well as a lot of people who aren't a talking head but just write about the NFL, would tell you Trent Baalke was a massive impediment to them bringing in a good coach. It's not like some sort of novel concept that I'm sharing here. You guys heard it a billion times that Trent Baalke was the issue. Exile says, hard for me to feel bad about billionaire owners. 100%. I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad about those guys at all. Nick says, put yourself in Lee and Cohen's shoes. Of course you take that job. Absolutely. They feel like, oh, he made up a story about his kid being sick and went and take this interview. I mean, sure, the skipping time to go take the interview is it's always going to be a little bit sketchy. But at the end of the day, he got a head job, and it's hard to fault him. There's only 32 of them out there. Okay. That'll do it for our show today. We will be back next week with the preview to the Super Bowl. We'll have announcements on all of our contests that we've got for the Super Bowl. We will be doing 2 contests, the first of which is the Shark Tank show concept. And there was a question about what happens if the line moves. Haven't thought about that yet, but I think what we'll probably do is try to do something where we get your submissions in by like 5 o'clock on Monday, and then the show is Tuesday at like noon. And so the odds that like a line is going to move too much should not really impact our ability to pick that prop. And obviously we'll be betting it and telling you guys about it at the current number in the market, because we're literally going to be betting it live on the show as part of the process. So, I don't think that's going to be too big of a deal. The other sort of prop contest that we will do is something we did last year, and that's just a very simple survey that's going to be up at sharpfootballanalysis.com. And you can wait until 20 minutes before kickoff if you want to. You're basically going to go through and answer like 15 questions, like one of those little quizzes that which one is more, this or that? And you hit a button and then you go to, it pops up the next question automatically, pops up the next question, pops up the next question. It takes like a whole 5 minutes to fill out. It'll be like, it'll have a bunch of questions, but at the end of the day, what it'll allow us to do is get your kind of picks on some props and something, we'll have something in there about the coin toss and a few other things. It'll be fun to enter, and we'll have prizes at the end of that as well. So you could do that 3 days before the big game on Sunday, or you could do it 30 minutes before kickoff, whatever you want to do, but that'll be something very easy. We'll have more announcements about that as well. I'll try to give back. We've had a great season, right? We've won a lot of money. Hopefully, if you guys have been following us from day one, I know people get in at different times, so not everybody has won the way that we have since the beginning of the season. Some of you guys didn't get involved with our futures, but we've had a great season at every step of the way, especially futures and stuff earlier this year. And if you guys want a chance to get some rewards from that, we've got them for you here with the prizes and contests that we're going to be doing for the Super Bowl prop, where we're going to pick one person, as well as for this other Super Bowl prop contest, which is like an online survey that's easy to fill out. We're going to pick multiple people there. So a lot of things upcoming that we're going to be talking more about next week. Until then, make sure that you use the code SHOW76. You can get the weekly package for $24. You can get on board for everything through the Super Bowl at 76% off, because that's what our record is on postseason. What was that? I forget what that 76% related to here, but at any rate, we used 76%. So head on over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Check that out. We will see you guys next week. Good luck on all your bets this weekend. Only 3 games left Sunday night. There's only going to be 1 game left. We got a 2-week buildup. So cherish these moments that you have to play some of these bets and then to watch the action. It's going to be a blast, and we'll see you guys next week.